You are watching a clip from the Sketchy A.F podcast here on the Shivery Studios YouTube channel. New episodes post every Friday, so don't forget to subscribe. One of the things you talked about on Twitter, and it's a big talking point and a big hot button issue, I suppose, in the art world at the moment, and you'd mentioned it a few times, and it was this idea with AI art being this revealing thing that came along, and I forget the name of the artist, but you'd put up something on Twitter there, it might have been about a month ago at this point, where someone had Googled a painter, and the first images that were coming up of his work were digital AI generated things. And I was just wondering, in general, your kind of outlook and your take on the art world in general, and of course, AI being that big hot button topic at the moment.
Yeah, the artist was Edward Hopper, American painter, early 20th century, and I'd actually just been to see a Hopper show in New York that was phenomenal in October. One of my favorites, and I saw that somebody had posted on Google that if you search for Edward Hopper and the image results, the very first one was an AI generated image. Obviously, that's a Google problem more than anything.
Yeah.
We need them to have better AI detection, and they need to figure out how to solve that. But yeah, in my opinion, it's not even art. It's AI quote unquote art. I think it's just AI images. It's a way of generating an image based on billions of images that have come before it. Just kind of as sort of this machine learning. They learn to identify styles and body parts and elements of nature and whatever else, and then different color themes that are used frequently and so on. If you look at a lot of the results from Midjoirney, there's a very similar sort of sameness to the color schemes and the color, and the rendering is always completely tight all the way throughout the picture. The compositions are terrible. This is because there's no human there guiding the design of the picture plane and understanding composition, understanding focal points, and understanding how to draw out emotion through color and or rather create an emotional response from the viewer. All the things that make art so great because of the human involvement really aren't there. So the result is you get something that's maybe by certain standards, quote unquote, pretty. Anybody who makes art themselves or knows a little bit about art is not going to consider it pretty because they know the difference. But what worries me is the race to the bottom, where there are enough people out there who would normally pay an artist to create a work, no matter how small. A great example would be that when I started, and even until recently, a lot of the work I did was just called spot illustration, little spot illustration of a person walking out the door to go to work, a little spot illustration of somebody just sitting in a park having a sandwich, whether for books or for editorial purposes. And these add up, and so they accumulate, and the money accumulates because of these little jobs. They're a great stepping stone. They're a great starting point for artists who want to get into illustration for book and editorial, to start with spot illustration. They're a low lift. If these kinds of things are no longer being assigned as assignment work, it eliminates yet another way for people, another entry point into illustration for people, which is very bad. But then you come right up to the top level where you have book illustration for covers, which has been a really great and booming kind of business for the last few years because of the popularity of middle grade reader books and sci-fi and fantasy books for these high school kids and everything, and also for young adults and even older adults. So you've seen an explosion of illustrated covers in these genres. Well, already, unfortunately, some publishers wishing to save some money are just they're working with some AI to generate some of the covers, either for just the online versions of a book, if there isn't a printed version, or even for the printed versions. If we see that happening now, before there's even a copyright allowance there for that work to even be used, I mean, artists haven't been the artists on who the AI trained were never paid. They were never compensated. This is the biggest sticking point beyond anything else, that in order for these companies to profit, so Midjourney, etc., if they wish to make money on their product, in my view, it's illegal to do so without having had any permission from the artists.
Certainly. I think that is definitely one of the bigger issues. Speaking to other artists and seeing the way people respond to AI art in general, it seems that the work that's kind of swallowed up by these computer systems and these learning systems, people are putting their artwork online, and that artwork is being taken without their consent. It's
Mhm.
They haven't put that up there for it to be used in this way. And I think with how much of a new technology it is, there doesn't really seem to be the legal protections put in place for artists who are, coming up. It is still very much the Wild West at the minute. And I think it will be very, very difficult to really implement a lot of laws that would offer protections for any artists, because you would imagine that these systems, they will be so vast that enforcing it would be quite difficult. But certainly, I think when you're talking about those entry level jobs, these are the things that people use as a means to break into the industry, and I think that's probably where AI art does kind of present the biggest issue. I don't think we're going to get to a point where we see AI generated art up in gallery walls. I don't think
Mhm.
that's where it's going to go. But with it being still, I suppose, relatively in its infancy as a technology, certainly when you're talking about those book illustrations, it is an area where I could see there's a publisher who they're not particularly interested perhaps in the integrity of the art being used. They need something cheap, they need something quick, and they're obviously going to go in that sort of direction. And in one sense, from a business point of view, I understand where they're coming from, but it just does seem like there should be some sort of tipping point where there will be kind of some sort of legal protection brought in for this. I'm not sure how it would work, but yeah, it's definitely
Well,
a worrying thing.
the funny thing is how the justification, I mean, how they dance around, well, we'll go ahead and use AI for the cover, but you're not using AI to write the book. So the writer's getting paid and the writer's getting money, but the book, with we all know, if you are looking at books, half the time the reason you even pick one up in the first place, if not more often than half the time, is the cover art.
Yeah.
And so obviously that plays an important role in the sale of the book. And these, a lot of covers go on to become an iconic sort of representation of that title of the right for the writer. I mean, there are certain books that we think of, like the Harry Potter series and so on. You recognize the illustrations by Mary Grand Pré, as just being this sort of fixture of the industry, and it's something that you recognize in the United States. Now, in England, they had a different artist whose name I'm forgetting, but when they first came out, and that's everyone relates to that. And the same for J.R.R. Tolkien's books and the illustrations of Alan Lee, and they go hand in hand, and so they're important. But then look at concept art for film and video games and TV, and look at the production art for
Yeah.
movies and animated films and so on, and you get into a whole other big problem where backgrounds will just be generated, or character design, or spaceships and other equipment and weapons and things like that for these games and for films. These are important jobs that humans are currently doing. I don't see any reason why we need to use technology to replace artists of all things. I think
Uh-huh.
I understand, like, if there's coal mining to be done and you can use some drilling machines and take care and people don't die in the coal mines,
Yeah.
there are probably better things for them to do with their lives, and maybe that's good. But the beauty that we create as humans in the form of the arts in general, I think it's a loss if we are trying to automate that even further. Or yeah, I'm concerned about it just as you are. And I work for a tech company, and I think that we have an opportunity as a tech company to do it in a way that's a lot more of a tool-based approach. I think if we can create tools for artists, literally
Yeah.
for artists, not for the people who are their customers, to cut them out of the equation, but if we can create tools for artists, then I think we're on a good path.